We'll call to order. Flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Open Public Meetings Act statement. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies, at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Augusta, Branchville, and Sussex post offices, and the notice sent to the New Jersey Herald, the Star Ledger, and the clerk of the boroughs of Branchville and Sussex, and the townships of Frankfort, Lafayette, and Wantage. Mission statement. High Point Regional High School, in partnership with staff, family, and community, is dedicated to the quest for individual excellence. By fostering high standards of achievement, we prepare our students to become responsible and productive members of a diverse society. Jim, would you have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ancliffe.
Here.
Mr. Morengi.
Here.
Mrs. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Dunn. He is muted.
Present via teleconference.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith.
Here.
Dr. Carrazza.
Here.
Ms. Nugent.
Here.
Ms. Tadona.
Here.
Dr. Keough.
Present.
Dr. Ripley.
Here.
All right. What we're going to do now is start our training session being held by Kathy Hellworth from the New Jersey School Boards Association. Welcome, Kathy. Thank you for the long trip up here.
Oh, thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.
I really do appreciate it, and wow, I am very impressed at your commitment. And I am so sorry, Wayne, that you are joining us on the phone and can't follow the materials. I will make sure that you get them. I appreciate your presence as well, so thank you, everybody, for
No problem, thank you.
oh, yeah, okay, so tonight's exciting topic is Robert's Rules. As always, please feel free to interrupt me with any kind of questions or this or that. I have in your packets a printout of the presentation that we're going to go through. And I also have a marvelous guide to parliamentary procedure that really kind of distills all of this down into the things that you need to know to go through your board meetings using Robert's Rules. And my favorite part of this booklet, and we have one for you too, Wayne, is the last part is a cheat sheet on all the different kinds of motions and how you need to. But I'll bet you probably know a lot of this already. That being said, there are people out there, you may know them, you may be one of them, who are really, they're experts on Robert's Rules. They're real passionate about it. They know all the ins and outs and all the little esoteric details and the not so esoteric details, and they find it really fascinating. There's people out there who really jive with this. I am not necessarily one of those people, I will tell you at the outset. But I will say that I am a big fan of Robert's Rules and parliamentary procedure, because what parliamentary procedure does is it helps you move through your meeting and get to what is most important, which is your agenda and voting on your agenda items in the most responsible way, where everyone has a chance to contribute to the conversation and to discuss with the board what they're about to pass and why they should or why they shouldn't. And that is a beautiful thing. So I really do appreciate that we're doing this session tonight. And it's not as boring as it sounds. I gave this at the ASBO meeting a month ago, and it was a big hit for whatever reason. So, that being said, at the outset, Robert's Rules, parliamentary procedure, they're not exactly interchangeable, but I'm going to use the phrase Robert's Rules and not Debbie's Rules, which I understand is a thing. I don't understand why, but well, let's see if we can get the two of them to dovetail, right? But in all honesty, it's a set of proven rules to move through the meeting, but it's not law, okay? This is not legislative. This is probably delineated in your bylaws, what type of parliamentary procedure you're going to use. Most boards do use Robert's rules. I'm not sure if you guys do. You might want to check your bylaws, but even if it's okay, I'm
Yes,
getting a
we
nod,
do.
so it's Robert's rules. So, okay, we are in good shape. So it is a set of guidelines, honestly. So if for some odd reason the board finds itself diverging from these, either at the heat of the moment in the table or in practice, that does not negate the good work that you've done. It doesn't make invalid the votes that you have passed. It's just that you're not following your policy, which is not something that I would advocate for you to do. So let's talk a little bit about the person who brought us here tonight. And I don't mean Bill, although thank you very much for having me. Henry Martin Robert, okay, is the Robert of Robert's Rules. It is, it's because of him that we have this system, and I think that the reason why is very interesting, and I think it's kind of illustrative for school boards. He was a West Point graduate, and he was stationed in Massachusetts during the onset of the Civil War. He was a young man, I forget what rank he had, but he was actually, he was from Ohio, but he was from a Southern family. He grew up in, well, he was born in South Carolina, but his family was very abolitionist, very Christian. And they found that living in South Carolina was becoming problematic for their value system, to live out their value system and stay where they were. So they wound up moving to, I believe, Ohio, and that's where Henry Martin was raised, and they still were very firm abolitionists, still very devout Christians. And when he was stationed in New Bedford, Massachusetts at the beginning of the Civil War, he was asked to preside over a town hall, a church meeting, church/town hall meeting on the subject of abolitionism and slavery. So everything was kind of coming together, right? And he was asked because he was a military officer, and it spoke to his faith, it spoke to his values, so everything was going, you know, you can imagine how he felt when he was asked to preside over this. He readily agreed, and I do a lot of presentations, I kind of ramp myself up for him, so I can imagine how he was feeling. And we don't know how that meeting went exactly. There weren't minutes taken of it. But what we do know is that he said that his embarrassment was supreme. That's a quote. Because he couldn't get a handle on running the meeting properly. It was such a heated topic that all of the participants talked over each other. There were dominant personalities that forced the conversation in a particular way, shut out a lot of people, and it went on for a very long time. There's a report that it went on for 14 hours. I'm not quite sure if that's the case, but he was humiliated, right? He was humiliated. So he figured there's got to be a way to keep this from ever happening again to anyone who is presiding over a meeting like this. So he studied parliamentary procedure, the ones that were in place for the United States government, the ones that were in place for Europe, and he came out with Robert's Rules in 1876 and published it, and it was a gigantic hit, and it's currently in its 11th edition. So it's actually proven to be very effective. And why you want to use it? I think it kind of speaks for itself. We didn't take that picture anywhere near here. Like I said, there's just too many people in it for Sussex County, but I think you get our point.
Looks like 4.
So let's see here if I can advance through. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to use my clicker. Jim, I don't know what kind of little imp is always preventing me from being effective here. I'm so sorry. You are. Is it on? Let's see.
Yep.
Oh, yep, there we go, okay. All right, so why do we use it? Pretty easy, right? All these bullet points, provide structure to the meeting, keep order, everyone has the opportunity to participate. But my favorite 2 bullet points are the ones at the bottom. To observe the rule of the majority, I would actually add to that to establish and observe the rule of the majority, and also to protect the rights of the minority in every decision that you make, everything that is before you. And that's why I think Robert's Rules is most valuable for school boards. There are 5 principles that guide us through Robert's Rules, right? That's the 5 principles is why we do it. 1, this is how to make it work. Number 1, crucial, you discuss one subject at a time. There's one main motion on the table at a time. And while that motion is being entertained, all of the participants, everyone around the dais, okay, not your public, but the people around the dais, have free and full opportunities for discussion. And everyone, whether you are in the majority, the minority, if you are president, vice president or not, every board member has equal rights to speak at the dais. And again, it carries out the rule of majority, respects the rights of the minority, and it really takes personality out of it. It is a very orderly, factual system, and especially when we're dealing with really contentious issues that have, great impact on the people that we are serving, it is a blessing, right? It just takes all of that out and keeps us to the work at hand. So in order to get parliamentary procedure, which sounds so wonderful to work, is you need to master the motions, right? There is a lot of different kinds of motions. There's different types and subtypes and all different, terminology to learn. And it can seem daunting, but shouldn't be, just focus on the ones that you need to know. And then you can pick up the little bells and whistles along the way. But most of the time, there's just a couple that you need to master, and we'll talk about that. So to begin, at the beginning, we are going to have our meetings only when there is a quorum present, as we know. And that's the number of members who have to be present to hold a legal meeting, a majority of the board. And that is whether it's physical or via electronic use. We always say, do not communicate over electronic media unless it's an advertised meeting, right, that the public can listen to and attend, right? But sometimes we don't have a quorum. Impressive that tonight we do. If we did not have a quorum, there are some things that you can do. You can set the time for another meeting. You can end the meeting if someone has to run out and the meeting's already in progress. You can take a recess, or, which is most typical, this happens a lot, especially when we're doing strategic planning or something like that, the meeting presider will say, we do not have a quorum present, this is not a public meeting, but we will continue as a committee meeting. So, we would deliver whatever kind of presentations need to be done, or this or that. But you cannot take action if there is not a quorum present, okay? So Robert's Rules really is all about protecting the agenda and making sure that you get to it. So what is an agenda, right? So we're beginning at the beginning. It is a formal list of topics that you need to discuss and vote upon. And it's typically developed, so you check your policy manual, by your president, your superintendent, your business administrator, and distributed to you all in advance. A best practice, but one that I never see, but that is in accordance with Robert's Rules, and again, it certainly doesn't negate all of the good work that you do at a meeting if you don't do this, is to approve the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. And if you wanted to change the order of agenda items, let's say Kathy's running late, right? And I'm supposed to go up first. You could actually, what you really should be doing is make a motion to change the order of the meeting. It's called a suspension of the rules, and 2/3 of you would have to approve it, and then you will wait for Kathy. Now, let's think about that practically.
Is that only if you approve the agenda?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, let's think about it. Let's just say Kathy's not here and you don't approve it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna do,
Yeah.
So a lot of this is kind of going through,
Well, but I meant
procedural
like
steps,
because we don't, do we do that currently?
Yeah.
No.
You
Right,
probably
so that's what I'm saying, so if we're just skipping over that altogether, do we have to do this last one?
No, you don't.
Unless
Okay.
if we switch over from the Debbie rules to Robert rules.
I'll bet that's completely at odds with Debbie's rules, right?
If you were to conform to this where it says 2/3 vote, is that 2/3 of the full board irrespective of who's present, or 2/3 of those who are present?
2/3 of those who are present. So, I mean, and it is interesting, I don't think I've ever seen that, I don't think I've ever seen a motion to approve an agenda. But, or maybe it's happened and I didn't even notice, I don't know, but it's atypical, it is a best practice. And speaking of motions, these are the types of motions that we're going to be discussing tonight. The one that you use the most, of course, is the main motions and subsidiary motions. But there's also a couple that you probably use, like the bring back motions especially, and we'll talk about all of those, and if you have questions, by all means, let me know. So the main motion is the one you're most familiar with. It introduces a subject, and you consider only one main motion at a time. So before you move on another motion, you have to completely work through this main motion. Must be disposed of is the lingo we have here, right? So the way to start that is to say, I move XYZ, and they will require a second, and they are debatable, and they are amendable. You need a simple majority vote to pass a main motion according to Robert's rules. I also have in your folder board voting requirements for the different types of motions, like personnel and approval of bonds and all of that stuff. So that's in there. But how do you do this? So the member addresses and is recognized by the chair. The motion is seconded if it is required. I will tell you something that does not require a second is nominations for president and vice president at your reorg meetings that are coming up. But typically a main motion needs a second. And the chair, the meeting presider, typically the president, restates the motion. And now that is officially board business. And then you ask, is there any discussion on the motion at hand? And the board discusses the motion. And then at the end of all of that, the chair repeats the motion and calls the question, which means it's time to vote on it. Vote is taken, the results announced, and you can move on to your next motion. That sounds pretty simple. I think you know this lingo here. Just as an example that we'll use throughout our presentation, board member 1 says, I move to implement the standard-based report cards for the 2017-2018 board school year. Board member 2 seconds it, and the board president would repeat, for clarity, the motion to implement standard-based report cards for the 2017-18 school year has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? And that's where the interesting stuff takes place, right? The discussion. So how do you debate? How do you discuss a motion? Oh, there's all sorts of approaches to it. Let's take a look at what Robert's Rule says. So the president recognizes each speaker. That is key. That keeps us all from talking all over each other. I've seen that happen plenty of times where people don't wait their turns and they are not even aware that the board president is presiding over the meeting and things get heated. And that is, yeah, that's something, yes.
Well, we do it where the chairperson does any discussion and stuff like that.
The chairperson says, is there any discussion?
Yeah.
Exactly right.
That's okay? Oh, so it doesn't have to be the board president?
Well, actually, no, the chair of the meeting chair,
No,
which is
that's
the
not-
board president. So
Say the
now,
chair of
The committee chair.
so the committee chair at your meeting says, is there any discussion? That's Debbie's rules, okay? And that, again, does not invalidate your work,
Okay.
but according to Robert's rules, black and white, by the
Close
book,
enough.
But
Your board
somebody's
president,
asking
your
if there's
meeting
any
presider, yes.
discussion or concerns or comments to be made, and then we proceed accordingly.
Right,
But only
right,
one
so,
person holds the gavel,
Yes.
that's exactly right, Anthony.
controls the meeting.
That's exactly right. So if it's been okay with your board president and your meeting presiders to do that, and you're getting your work done in an orderly, respectful fashion, you're doing the right thing, right? It may not be Robert's Rules to letters, but Robert's Rules are not state law. It's a procedure, right? It's a procedure. You're working through it and you're doing very well. So in any case, but having one person preside over this, especially in a lot of boards where things get, or over a lot of issues where things get heated, is that the board president, the meeting presider, retains control of the meeting. And he or she has the ability to move the discussion forward in a way that will keep you moving towards the agenda and not get sidetracked. And that is really what we're talking about basically is civility here, right? On this, I mean, here's some kind of things that shock people, right? Avoid using members' names during debate. That's a Robert's Rules gig. You're really not supposed to talk to or about any person at the dais, only towards the board president. You're not even supposed to say, Mr. President, I agree with Mrs. Hellowa. Believe it or not, that is out of line with Robert's Rules. You may want to talk about the point that Mrs. Hellowa made, but not about her directly. So it's very, and this is where we get really technical here, and most boards don't follow that procedure and get their work done well.
I believe that's try to take the personality out of it.
That's exactly
Stick to
right.
the subject, not the personality.
That's exactly right, to stick to the subject. And a lot of times when you you know this from your personal life, right? When you insert someone's name in there or their point of view, then you're putting that person in the middle almost of an argument, and that's not going to advance the work of the board the way it should be done.
So as I've been watching as I said, the committee discussion, the chair would say the gentleman.
Yes.
So rather than directly stating their name, he says the gentleman. The gentleman is the recognized.
Yeah, that's probably
Or the
why they're
gentlewoman,
doing that.
yeah,
Now, they
And
don't,
they say,
yeah.
Mr. President,
yeah,
the gentleman, da, da, da.
right,
So-
they don't.
But they're really addressing the whole room.
So I should
Unless-
say to the gentleman from Sussex now.
Yeah.
Unless they're voting, they never use names.
Right, well, I do not believe they use Robert's rules
Okay.
exactly, but that's the same,
Okay,
that's the same
Interesting.
ball of wax. It's probably written into their parliamentary procedure that they are not to use others' names. So that's an interesting illustration. Now, what if there's an amendment on, your main motion, but you've got something that you want to add or take away to it as a board member, right? This is something that you're considering. You have the right to do that. You can amend a motion. You can have the board consider something different than what is put before them on the same topic. And that's amending a motion, and you can do that. You might want to add a word or a phrase. You might want to take part of the motion out, not really changing the intent. You might want to substitute things. You might want to change the intent, but have it, under the same topic. Depends on, like, let's say the policy that you're passing. So this is where you use a subsidiary motion. You can only use one subsidiary motion at a time, and you have to dispose of them in order, right? So what am I talking about? Let's use an example. So board member number 1 has noticed a mistake. I move to amend that the main motion read the district will implement the standard-based report cards for the 2018-19 school year. I don't know how that got past everybody, but it somehow did, and board member 1 wants to make sure everything is okay. And so then board member 2 realizes he's right, seconds the motion, and the meeting presided, the board president will say, the motion to amend the main motion to read, and they will read all that stuff over again, has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? And if there is discussion, okay, this is kind of a poor example because it's just a typo, but if there is discussion on this amended motion, you are discussing amending the motion only. You are not talking about the main motion, you're talking about changing the wording of the main motion. And it might pass and it might not. In this case, it would clearly pass. Here, all in favor, any opposed? Up, hearing none, the motion carries. That's perfectly fine. And then that's disposed, right? So the language now is, let's see here, let me get back to, instead of saying the motion to implement standard reports card for 2017-18, it's now 18-19. That's what they're debating now, right? So the vote was taken on the amendment to change the motion only, not on the main motion. You're gonna have to go back and vote on the amended motion. And you can also continue to discuss the main motion, which is now amended, in this case, to read 18-19, right? And you vote on them in inverse order. So as they are added, you can only have one on the floor at a time. You're not going to be voting on the main motion until your vote to amend has been disposed of. Either it's gonna pass or it's not. But once it's moved and it's seconded, you gotta stop thinking about the main motion and think about the subsidiary motion to amend. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Here's some other subsidiary motions that you might use or see. Lay on the table this is a very technical presentation tonight. I hear about tabling all the time, and I have, again, I don't think I've ever heard that used correctly the way it's written into Robert's rules. Because to lay on the table, to table something, is actually to take a motion and to move it to the other side of the metaphorical table that's in front of you. You're not taking it off the table. You are not stopping consideration for it for the evening. You are just putting it aside because something else has come up at the meeting that you want to tackle before you talk about this this motion. So you make a motion to lay something on the table, to table it. It is not meant to delay consideration for any length of time, just for a few minutes, really. What mostly people mean when they say table something is they want to postpone something definitely or indefinitely, right? So to postpone definitely is to delay action on something until the next meeting, until September, until after the curriculum committee has met. That's postponing definitely. You can also postpone something indefinitely. That kills it. That kills it. If you make a motion to postpone something indefinitely, you are killing the main motion, pretty much forever, okay? Just so that you know, that's how you kill motions. You also may want to make a motion to refer something to a committee, that's a popular one. And to call the question is also a subsidiary motion, probably one of the more interesting ones. That is a call to stop debate and just vote. You are so tired of this conversation, as respectful as it is. We are going over the same old ground, oh my God. Can we just vote on this? I make a motion to call the question. And that means we gotta stop talking about this and move on, in my opinion.
So who can make those motions? Anybody?
Anyone can make
Okay,
it,
that's what I
but
thought.
that doesn't necessarily stop debate, because Bill is absolutely right. It needs to be seconded,
Okay.
and it needs to be approved by 2/3 of the members present,
Got it.
okay? So just because you think it's a great idea to call the question, doesn't mean that everybody else does, okay? So it does protect the work of the majority, it does, the majority wants to keep debating, then the majority has that absolute right. The minority has a right to put it in front of everybody, but if it doesn't work, then, sorry guys, you're back to talking, right? Okay. Incidental motions, things like a point of order, withdrawal of motion, or a point of information are about handling the motion by the body, by the legislative body, by the Board of Education, but it doesn't really have to do with the actual motion itself. A point of order, and they're not debatable either. A point of order, they don't require a second. Point of order, Mr. Chair, identifies a breach of rule. We're not moving through our agenda as published, right? Withdrawal motion. I made a motion, it was seconded, but now I'm thinking, that's a really bad idea. I make a motion to withdraw my motion. If it was seconded, then you need approval from the person who seconded it as well, otherwise it's still alive. If it was not seconded and it was withdrawn, as soon as you put it out there, it doesn't even need to be recorded in the minutes. And a point of information, which kind of clarifies, asks for clarification. Yes.
So if these are not debatable, and one individual says point of order, believing that there's a breach of rules, and someone else believes that there's not been a breach of rules, how is that not debatable?
It is up to the chair
All right.
to decide if rules are.
Which is what I've been watching for the last.
Or sergeant at arms.
Or sergeant at arms. See, Debbie's rules and Robert's rules, they mirror each
close,
other and
they're pretty
so,
close.
yeah, this is
So,
good.
so when Nadler's, when that people would point of order, he would not recognize the point of order, it's not debatable, so whatever he says goes, irrespective of whether one person believes it or not.
That's exactly right. That's exactly.
I
Got
get
the
it.
gavel.
Yeah,
It's important who presides, right?
Yeah.
Voting for a board president is an important thing for boards to do. You need to consider who's got the chops to do this, So, here's an example of a point of order, but this is kind of friendly. Board member says, I just want to clarify for everyone, we're voting on the amendment only, when things get confused and convoluted, and then yes, the board president would say, absolutely, we're voting on the amendment to the main motion, okay, in our example. Here's the, blah, 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 moving to withdraw, I think you can kind of figure that one out. A privilege motion is kind of interesting. They don't relate to the main motion, but they do take precedence over the main motion because something really emergent has come to the forefront, right? You may call for the orders of the day because your agenda's getting all messed up. You may call a question of privilege, like the fan is too loud and I can't hear. It's so hot in here, I think I'm going to faint. Someone has fainted, you know, that's technically a question of privilege. And that is a privilege motion. Also, a motion to recess and a motion to adjourn, those are all privilege motions too. So here's an example of that. Board member says, oh, question of privilege, and the board president, the meeting presider says, yes, your question. I can't hear because of this fan. No one needs to second that and say, yeah, the fan is really loud, so I second it. And no one has to discuss, you know, maybe you should get your hearing checked, I can hear fine, blah, 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 blah. The chair just decides, you know, if the fan needs to be shut off or not. Bring back motions. You may find that you use these on occasion. If you are using that whole tabling motion, the way it's supposed to be acted upon, then during the meeting you'll need to take it back from the table. You've tabled something, meaning you pushed it aside for a little while, you're taking it back from the table. That's a bring back motion.
But only one that has not been, that has been indefinitely, but not.
That's, yeah, see, postponing definitely and postponing indefinitely, we're about to talk about those.
Right, so, okay.
Yeah, so if you were to postpone something definitely, it would likely show up on a future agenda, right?
As opposed to tabling it means the same agenda, just a different time.
Exactly. And there is another one where you might be finding yourself looking at the same issue during the same meeting. So let's talk about that. I do get these terms mixed up a little bit. I have to always think because they both begin with R. Motion to rescind and motion to reconsider. So rescind, okay, is a motion to repeal a previously adopted motion that was done at a different meeting entirely. It is done, it can be done, you decided, the board decided on something, but it's really eating at you, you really didn't like it, you can make a motion to rescind. Not at that same meeting. You'll have to do it at a future meeting. The next meeting, 2 meetings ago, a year from now, that's a motion to rescind. That's on something that passed. That's a motion to rescind on a previously adopted motion. Now, what we were just talking about a couple minutes ago, you know, something is a motion to reconsider. And that's something that was previously decided at your meeting, at the board table. It's already been voted on, you're still sitting there, but second public commentary, here's an example, second public commentary has come up. And someone speaks at the microphone and tells you their point of view or their issue about something that has just passed from the board agenda, right? You voted it through, and you start to really reconsider. That might have been the wrong thing. We really should talk about this particular point of view that we're just hearing about now. So, I voted on the prevailing side to either defeat the motion or to pass the motion. I can offer a motion to reconsider. I cannot offer a motion to reconsider if I was on the quote-unquote losing side, right? If I'm in the minority, I can't keep making motions to reconsider and us go over and over this stuff, right? So you can see where Robert's Rules really does help to keep order here. But if I really regret my vote, it's really eating at me, before the meeting adjourns, I can make a motion to as long as I'm with the majority, okay? So that's kind of interesting. Any questions on all this business? Okay, voting methods, all right.
Just to mention again, all these different motions, if they're not seconded, then just move on, it's not even part of the.
That's exactly right. If a motion needs a second and it doesn't get one, then that's the end of that, right? It just dies out. And that does happen on occasion, right? So that's another great thing about Robert's Rules. It really does keep you from treading over the same old ground. I mean, you know that sometimes people really have a passion and they work towards that and they have tunnel vision and they really, really, really want to get you to see things their way. This kind of puts an order to that, you know? If you can convince the majority to vote with you, then that's fine. If you can't, then you're just going to have to live with the decision that was made by the majority of the board. It protects that majority decision. That's kind of important, but it also protects the right of the minority as well. Everyone gets a chance to weigh in. So you're voting, right? Different voting methods on this slide. Voice vote, you're familiar with these. Rising vote. Rising vote is so corny. It's when you actually stand up to give your vote, right? So I don't see that too often.
We're not doing that.
I just made tonight.
Going out with a bang.
Play musical chairs in the end.
Well,
Fine.
Anthony, you may wanna make a motion on that later on, I don't know, you're learning. Roll call vote, very popular, ballot vote, right? Did we talk about ballot votes here? I think we might have.
We might have talked about it, I think we talked about it when we were, getting, you weren't there.
Okay.
It was about getting you guys in.
Oh, right,
Oh.
yes.
Okay,
About voting on
so
the,
you're familiar with ballot
What's the
vote, right?
difference between what's the difference between voice vote and roll call? We do roll call, right?
Voice vote is all in favor of.
Aye.
Oh, so we do both.
opposed,
Yeah, we've done both.
Okay.
roll call, we go individually as opposed to a group, voices, all in favor, aye, all opposed, nay.
Oh, thanks.
We
sorry.
used to do a lot of voice votes, and then, I don't know which BA showed up and said, you really need to have each member say something that's when it involves money,
Right.
which most of this does.
And personnel and all
And
that,
per- yeah,
and look, in your board voting requirements, will tell you what kind of a roll call vote you need, absolutely. A motion to adjourn, you know, really, a motion to recess, you know.
Right, okay, sorry, I don't know, I was gonna think, I was just thinking about the roll call, and I was like, but we're saying, yes, no.
That's it,
like,
well,
what's a
roll
voice
call
vote?
really is a
Got
best
it.
practice, and it should be recorded in the minutes, how everyone voted, right? Ballot votes are very interesting, because secret ballots are not permitted by law in New Jersey for school boards. So why is that even on there, why are we considering it? You can, as you probably know, entertain the idea of a ballot vote. But the ballot vote is not secret. The benefit to a ballot vote is that you have a prepared piece of paper, typically prepared by the board secretary with your name on it. The presider, you know, announces it's time, he calls the question, it's time to vote on the motion at hand, you indicate your vote on the ballot. Everyone is voting simultaneously. So, if-
You
yep,
don't know what
so if
anybody
I'm
else
sitting
did.
at the far end of the table and I see how this vote is gonna go, so I am going to vote the way that makes me most popular politically. You know, either I'll be a hero, I'll look like a hero, but it's gonna fail anyway, but I'll be able to, you know, cast a dissenting vote and I'll look like the good guy. Or, you know, I'm not going to vote my conscience because I can see where this is gonna go, so I just wanna be a member of the team, I'll just vote the way everybody else goes. Those are not optimal ways to vote, right? They happen, but they're not good. A ballot vote prevents that from happening. And a ballot vote really is a useful method for voting on very contentious items. If you were to close a school, if you were to redistrict, right, I mean, that's not an issue here, but, you know, officer, some kind of a contentious motion, you might want to consider a ballot.
At what point is it read out that who voted which way?
The board secretary would read it.
Right
Right?
afterwards.
They all
Absolutely.
submit them to
You
the
have-
secretary,
yeah.
who reads them out.
You have to know if it passes or not, and you have to know who voted how, that goes in the minutes. I have a whole document on board voting requirements, there's a difference between, you know, two-thirds of the full membership to 3/4 of the members present, I mean, you kind of know that. But also, you do have to kind of check, you know, majority of the full membership or majority of those present, and that's in your document there too, because that's not quite the same thing. And if you do have vacancies sometimes, or abstentions, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't affect, if you need a full 2/3 vote of the full membership, and you're just running on, you know, 2/3 of the board, the 1/3 is completely absent or abstaining, then you'll need a unanimous vote at the table. See what I'm saying on that? Hope I'm being clear, I'm sorry. Abstentions, which I just mentioned, talk about those for a minute, that's just not a vote at all, okay? It's not a yes vote, it's not a no vote, it is not a vote. And there are some good reasons to abstain, sometimes you have to, if you're conflicted, right, by the School Ethics Act, then you're going to have to abstain. You can also abstain with a clear conscience if you do not have enough knowledge to make a decision, right? If something is being presented and voted on, and you don't feel that you've had enough time or enough data to make a proper vote, then you can abstain with, like I said, with a clear conscience. Because you just can't vote, you just don't know what you're voting on, really. But you shouldn't abstain to avoid a tough vote. And that, unfortunately, I do see all the time. And then, you know, we have grown adults at school board, sitting around school board tables. It's not, like I said, if Robert's rules are not state law. So just because Robert's rule says you shouldn't abstain to avoid a tough vote doesn't mean that you have to. People do it, but honestly, I mean, your constituents put you here to vote on agenda items. And even when you don't have enough knowledge to make a decision, I do tell board members, you as a board, you have your agenda beforehand, right? Unless this is some kind of a last minute addendum or something that comes up at the table, it's on you to find out what you need to know to cast that vote. You don't sit at the table and say, well, I had a busy weekend, I couldn't open my packet, and I think, you know, I'm just gonna abstain, I just didn't have the time. You know, excuse me for inserting my opinion in here, but I don't think that that's good school board service. Okay. And I'm getting some nods, so I know you guys buy in, which is fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about voting. See if you can figure this one out. So the standard-based report cards vote is taken on our hypothetical vote, and 4 people voted yes, and 4 people voted no, and 1 person, I don't know why, I don't see why they would be conflicted, so they're being a little bit of a chicken and they abstained. What happens to the standard-based report card? It doesn't pass. Same as a defeat, right? So even though you might say, an abstention is the same as a defeat, it really technically is not, but it almost functions the same way as a no vote in this case. Okay, now good old Jesse Adams, right? Jesse Adams is the new facilities director on the agenda. That's the superintendent's recommendation, and 3 people are conflicted, so they had to abstain. You have 4 yes votes. You have 2 no votes. Does this pass? That's right, it does not pass. And why does it not pass?
Because it's a majority.
Exactly right, nice work, okay. I mentioned this earlier with elections at the reorg, you don't need a second. And according to Robert's rules, they are not debatable, but check your bylaws for your procedures. You know, and by the way, you can even nominate yourself if you want. If you have the pleasure of serving on a board of education with your spouse, you can nominate your spouse for something, you're not conflicted, or your son or daughter, you can nominate them too if they're a board member. And if you don't quite make if you don't pass muster as a board president, that goes to someone else, you can also be nominated for vice president. You can be nominated for more than one office. Now, as far as voting goes, unless your bylaws say differently, this is the Robert's Rules version, your bylaws may be different. You should vote on candidates in the order that they were nominated. So I nominate Kathy Hellowa, and then someone nominates Kevin Hellowa. Doesn't need a second, but there are 2 people being considered for the presidency. You vote for Kathy first, and it's a roll call vote typically, where you vote yes or no, not say Kathy or say Kevin. You vote on Kathy, 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 Kevin, 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 Kevin. Up, Kathy won, you don't have to vote on Kevin. Kathy loses, then you vote on Kevin. If Kevin loses, right, then you have to go right back.
I thought we took nominations, and if there were 2 people, then I went down the line.
I believe
and
you did.
And
I
you,
believe
and
that's
you
what
said
we
who
did,
you
yeah.
wanted to
Because
vote for.
I nominated
Me.
me, and and then someone else nominated, I believe, Wayne. Sorry, Wayne. And Dr. May was, what's that?
And we took the vote on
Yeah,
that.
Dr. May was voted on first, and then Wayne was voted on second.
Well, you could do that,
Opposite.
you know, I mean, it doesn't
Look
negate.
at the bylaws.
It may say that in your bylaws, and again, this is the black and white Robert's rules, it doesn't negate the vote of the board, right? They're guidelines,
But technically, if we had done it this way, we would have had the vote, and if the first person who was nominated is the first person we vote on, then if that person won it, we don't continue to do any more voting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I think Bill wants to put in his reconsider bill right now. Something that was voted on months
That would
ago.
be a motion to rescind.
I mean, rescind, damn it!
That was a long time
I almost
ago.
had it.
Very close, I have to think about it for a second
March
myself.
19th.
What time? Was it 7:36 or something?
Which will live in infamy.
Well, basically, just check your bylaws. Your bylaws will answer all, any kind of questions you have on Robert's rules, always go with what your bylaws say, right? Now, this is a very interesting topic, minutes, board minutes, right? They are a record of what happened at the meetings. They are not a recording. You do record your meetings, that's one type of data point, but minutes are not recordings. They are a record of what was done and not what was said, okay? So, what motions were offered and seconded, how the votes went, you do, that a committee report was given and maybe basically what it said, but not personal comments, not the discussion that goes around the board table. That, according to Robert's rules, does not belong in your board minutes. If you want a recording of what was said and debated for people who can't get to the meeting to see, then that's what you're doing. They can access your video recording, your audio recording, but the minutes are not for that. And I will give you as an example, Patterson. And I'm very fond of working in Patterson, but their minutes are an exact transcript of what the recordings are. Those minutes, just the minutes, run 50 to 80 pages depending on how many people are talking. Yeah, it's really hard, Anthony, for me to get a handle on what this board did, what they voted for, and it's just not optimal.
Do they have a,
Stenographer?
yeah,
You know what, they must, I don't see
They
somebody
just have
typing at that
somebody.
meeting, I do see them recording, so maybe they send it out
I was
for
just gonna say, they
somebody.
probably send it out for,
That's what
Yeah.
the courts do
for
now.
transcript.
Yeah,
Speech to text, it's the best thing in the world.
maybe it's,
To get
Well,
you in
use
jail
it.
now.
No, it is not, because let me tell you, the news people have a hard time with that text-to-speech stuff.
Yeah, well, and I'll bet that makes for some real interesting.
Here, here, and here, it does not translate well.
So now what about public comments, right? Because people do come up to the microphone and they comment on things, they're not taking votes. How do we record those? Your policy probably says that someone needs to state their name and their address or their affiliation or whatever it is. So you record that as part of the minutes. And then just kind of an overview of what they said at the top. And you don't have to say anything more than Mrs. Hellowa of 79 Ryman Road made a comment about busing. That's fine for the purposes of minutes and Robert's rules. We do, it's kind of interesting though, keep an eye on school board notes, because if there is a litigated case and a judge comes up with something else, we want to be aware of those.
Can
And
I
there-
ask a question in terms of the public comments? Does somebody have to live in the area? Like if, I know it seems like a silly question, but if
No,
I
it's
wanted to go
not.
to another district's board of ed
No, it's
and
not a
stand
silly
up and
question.
speak, could
It's
I?
not a silly question, and typically there's no prohibition on someone, as long as it's something that affects the district,
Right.
then they can, yeah.
Okay.
And I've seen that. There may be something different in your bylaws, and I'm not an attorney, so that's kind of an interesting question for your attorney, but I don't know of any prohibition that exists.
yeah, particularly when it's open comment, somebody could come from anywhere, and they
And
have,
they do,
Well, that's what I was.
and they do.
and say whatever they want.
And I would imagine that, I'm not an attorney, but I would imagine that that is allowable by law. I'm not an attorney, I can't say that enough, because,
I was
when you
like, I'm
think
gonna
about.
do this too.
Yeah, doctor.
Doctor.
Well, when you think about who can file an ethics charge, right, could be anybody, they don't even need to.
And
be-
it usually is anybody.
And they do.
I know, so I guess they are allowed to talk at your public commentary portion of your meeting too. The public comments has what's been termed heightened protection of your First Amendment rights at public comments at a public meeting of the legislative body. So, gotta be careful. You really gotta be careful with public comments. But here, remember how I said records what was done, not what was said? There is a notable exception. If the board enters into closed session improperly, right, you are a board member, and you see that the board is not doing things correctly according to the Open Public Meetings Act, that is a big deal, right? But the board's going into closed session. So you should state your objection clearly and ask that it be noted in the minutes that you believe the board's in violation of OPMA and why. And the board may disagree with you and go into closed session anyway. But if it is recorded in the minutes that you objected to that executive session, right, and why, you can remain at the table and remain in executive session without any kind of penalty to you. So that's kind of important to note in the minutes. That is something that needs to be recorded, even though it's not something that was done and it was something that was said. Okay, because I mean, if debate is going on in closed session and you're a board member and you're not conflicted, you have a right to be there. But, you know, hopefully that's not going to be the case, but just in case you ever find yourself in that situation, that's what happens. Here's an interesting question about approving the minutes. If a board member was absent from the meeting, do they need to abstain? Do they need to make that abstention? No, and that's the first time that the whole board has said no. Do you know why? Why do they not have to abstain?
I believe they have the right to vote on anything that's presented in front of the board, if they're not conflicted.
They've, in our case, they've read them, so they've already gone through them, and they trust that they're accurate.
Exactly right. See, I like Debbie's rules.
That's why Debbie rules.
If you ever Debbie, let us know. We'll do a PowerPoint on Debbie's rules also, first edition. But yeah, I mean, a vote of yes is all about confidence, right? I know a meeting took place. I know the board secretary knows what he or she is doing. And the process that we use is correct. So it's really a vote of confidence. Because the board has to have minutes for its public. There's no debate about that. You are obligated to provide the public with minutes. So you have to produce them. Can you imagine, and every time you put something up for a vote, there is a danger that it could be defeated, right? So the proper way to approve the minutes, although a roll call vote is perfectly fine, this is actually, I should say, my favorite way to approve the minutes, is, you know, as Debbie said, minutes are distributed in advance, everyone's seen them. So the meeting presider, the board president says minutes have been distributed. Are there any corrections? Meaning, did anybody see any errors? Are there typographical errors? God forbid, is my vote recorded incorrectly? I actually voted no on this, but I was recorded as a yes. Something like that. And if there is any corrections that you've noticed, you bring that forth, and they are noted in the minutes. And then the board president says, okay, the minutes are approved as corrected. As corrected. There's no objections, there's no vote to the minutes, there's only corrections. Okay? And I'm sorry if I seem so resolute on that, but I think it's
So you
kind of
can't vote
important
against
to
the
know.
minutes?
No, you really
Approval.
can't. You can't. You know, I mean, if you have corrections, if you don't think things, and that's where, honestly, Debbie, that whole thing about not recording what people say during the debate, this is where it shows up, right? If you make a regular practice of recording what people say and how they say it, he was listening in on his phone as walking in, not there. Then that's where the personalities start to get involved. You recorded it wrong. I didn't mean that. You're emphasizing, you know, you forgot that I emphasized this, blah, blah, blah. That's really not what minutes are for. And it also puts your board secretary in a really bad position, you know. That's just not very cool. So you want if your minutes are boring, that's okay. It's actually a good thing. Okay, so here's our little test. Can Bill change the order of the agenda to facilitate the work of the meeting?
Well, it has to be a motion to approve.
That's right. Can Jane nominate herself for president?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Even if nobody seconds her, right? She's still a
Doesn't need a
candidate.
second.
Tabling and postponing a motion, I know you know the answer to that one. Are they the
False
same?
there.
That's a big false.
Incorrect.
All right, and can John make a motion to rescind a 5-4 vote that was just taken earlier?
No, he would reconsider it.
That's exactly right, Anthony.
You gotta go back.
But can John reconsider it? What?
Only if can't rescind
Only
it.
if he was on the voting of the yes side.
There we go.
Or the winning
There we
side.
go.
The winning side.
You know, that's right. That's right. The prevailing side, I
like
guess
it.
we should
So when you
say,
come
right?
back to the board,
I'll teach you
you
later.
can rescind something that we do tonight.
And if Jane calls the question, does that automatically end debate?
Yes. Well.
No, it needs to be
it's
seconded.
Needs a
That's a
second.
good,
Yeah.
nice, yeah, maybe
And then-
Debbie's rules,
and then-
I don't know.
then it has-
Maybe they differ
But then it
a
has to be
little bit.
voted on by 2/3 if not mistaken.
That's exactly right, nice work.
Damn, I'm
Somebody's
good.
cheating.
But if Anthony
These are
wants,
Morangi's laws.
now if Anthony wants the minutes to be amended, right? To include all of his remarks on how smart he is and how he's getting all these questions right, can he do that? Let's assume he's.
Well, that's a big assumption, but.
No, he can't do
I
that,
don't
no,
know.
no.
That's a long time ago.
So basically, you know, these are just procedures to move your meetings along well and to protect the work on the agenda, right, that's laid out before the board. And they really do work. They keep order, they keep personalities out of this. If you have a board that really is in need of a, you know, course correction, adhering to Robert's rules very closely will often get the board back on track after a certain amount of meetings. And then you can kind of diverge from it. But what I do want to offer to you for your consideration is that one thing, Robert's Rules promotes order, and it does it very well. But one thing that Robert's Rules is not concerned about is it really doesn't care about relationships or teamwork, right? It's about efficiency. And I must admit, as a field service rep and my fellow field service reps, we place a value on the team, right? So it's a little bit at odds, and that's why when boards kind of find their way around Robert's Rules to keep things moving along, in accordance with the spirit of parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules, but also bringing in that teamwork piece and listening to everyone respectfully and their feelings and this and that and in a respectful, civil manner, then I see that you guys are doing really good work. Remember, these are just guidelines, they are not laws, but I absolutely do applaud your wanting to know what they are and exactly how to use them in the most efficient way. And if you go by them by the book, then you will be absolutely fine. But if you deviate from them every once in a while, it's not about using Robert's Rules as a weapon. It's about getting the board's work done and respecting the rights of the minority and protecting the decision of the majority. So, again, it's been another delightful hour with you guys, but I'm wondering if you guys have any questions for me or...
I have something, if you have a minute. We still have to, for next year, if we're gonna continue being certified, plan 4 training sessions for next year. And does anybody, I would suggest we have a training session on ethics since our bylaws require us to do ethics. That would leave 3 more left to schedule. Do we have any ideas on what anybody want a suggestion of what we might want to schedule for training for next year? Finance?
Okay, wow, okay, yeah, I have a menu in there too. If someone-
Yeah.
Oh, good, I was just trying to remember seeing the menu.
We should, yeah, I don't know if I've ever brought to you guys before,
So good.
but there's a menu. I can, and you know what, if there is a topic that you guys are really keenly interested that's not on the menu, I could probably get something together with a fair amount of notice.
Budget development,
Yes.
usually,
Yeah.
you know, finance, we think of that as budget, but maybe.
Well, you know, the
both
board's
things.
role in budget development, I think that's a good presentation. And that's
Declining
eye-opening.
enrollment.
That's actually,
What's that?
yeah.
Declining
Declining
We
enrollment.
do have a very good program on declining enrollment. And you know, the board's role in budget development is kind of an eye-opener for a lot of board members too. That's, I like them all. I also, I'm not sure, do we have social media on there? Is it, because we do have a social media
Oh, that would
program
be a good one.
that actually is very interesting. And anything, you know, if there's something that you've seen field service reps give at workshop, I can probably bring that to you. I did one about vacancies. I know that's not exactly the most exciting thing, but I could bring
We
that.
took care of that.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
had
yeah, I
some
think, I don't,
experience, we
yeah,
had some experience.
yeah, all at once.
Yeah, what's the 12 common mistakes? I like this and it's interesting too.
You know what, it is interesting. The only thing but I think it would be fine with this group is it's like kind of a negative thing, like don't do
Oh,
this,
okay.
don't do that, don't.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
we
fun,
don't need
it's
that.
fun actually.
Well, I
You
thought
see
it
it? See how we scored? Oh, yeah, we do that.
There you go, exactly.
I think
So that'll be a feel good
budget
one
and
for you guys.
I think you should stay away from the one after that, 12 common mistakes though.
Yeah, that's not allowed. Little duct tape will prevent that.
Yeah, I wasn't even gonna offer that.
Yeah, that should be crossed
I
out.
wasn't even gonna offer that. If
None
asked
of
me
you are
for it,
going to
I'd
have
say
to
yes.
concern yourselves with that.
So ethics, finance,
Yeah, he said declining
Can we
enrollment.
do-
declining enrollment, and
Okay,
12
Can we
is
do
the-
budget?
Yeah, and
development
budget too.
sooner
Okay.
rather than later?
Can we
Yes.
schedule for February?
yeah, we can
Third-
switch budget and finance in one presentation,
All right.
so
Third
intermingled.
February of,
Third February?
third Tuesday of February.
Third two, I'm not sure,
We haven't
I
had
will,
a
let me see
board
what
meeting.
I've got.
That,
Let me see what I've got, Bill.
but we also have to,
I think strategies for success may actually be a good one, even though I'm not gonna be here.
Well, there'll be an open session, Anthony, so you can join us.
I'm sure that's what we wanted to do.
If we
see
Time.
I am going to be in Clifton the third Wednesday.
Board member emeritus.
Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Is that the 18th?
18th.
Yeah.
Oh, guess what, I am open. That
Can you
is-
do that budget?
The budget finance
All
combo?
right, we
Budget
will.
finance
You know what?
combo, that'd be great.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just gonna block this out of my calendar. Email me, Bill, so that I know,
Sure.
but I just, oh, this pen is not working. Oh,
Like
here we
what?
go. No, I got it. Okay. All right, thank you.
5 o'clock?
That's
One of the
terrific.
kids.
I mean, honestly, the Clifton one, I'm supposed to be in Clifton for 6, but that's not even the same.
Spencer?
Usually I can do a double with this board because you guys meet at such a amenable time, I can go here and jet to another district, which is what I'm
Was
doing
it
here.
college?
So-
Where are you going now?
He just graduated this spring.
Ah,
Is that on the way home?
He was in college.
No,
bro.
no, thank you for asking, but it's all right, it's all good, so I'm just kinda getting.
No, I think he's still in college.
Okay. Any other questions for Kathy?
I'd like to make a comment after the recording's off.
Oh, okay, all right.
We're in public session.
Okay,
Any other questions for Kathy?
guys, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Really
Happy
appreciate it.
holidays,
Happy
whatever you all
holidays.
celebrate, happy new year, I look forward to
Safe travels.
2020. Thank you very much.
Okay?
Thanks, guys. Is anyone coming to the county meeting on Thursday?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All
Please
right.
present.
Well, I will be
Or
part of
part
it,
of a
yes,
crew.
I will be speaking on some level.
Well, all right, okay, I will see you guys then.
Right.
Great.
Good.
Thank you. All right, everybody, you all take care.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Oh, yeah, this is.
Motion to move to executive?
If anybody wants to make a motion will be made that the High Point Regional High School Board of Education enter executive session to provide an update on legal and personnel items which are exempt from public participation pursuant to New Jersey Public Laws 1975, Chapter 231, Open Public Meetings Act. Any discussions held by the board which need not remain confidential will be made public when appropriate. Minutes of the executive session will not be disclosed until the need for confidentiality no longer exists. The board will reconvene in public session in the cafeteria annex at the conclusion of the executive session. It is not anticipated that any action will be taken.
Can you include negotiations in there as well, please, based upon what we had just discussed?
Yes, included will not only be the legal and personnel, but also negotiations item.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no one opposed, we're gonna move to executive session. Do we want to make a motion to go back to public session?
Motion to go back to public?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing no one opposed, we're back to public session. Do we have any unfinished business? Seeing no unfinished business, we have approval of the minutes. We have the regular meeting minutes of November 19th, 2019, and executive session minutes of November 19th, 2019. We have a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Ratcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Karatza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Dr. Keel?
Yes. Public comments. In accordance with, this is on agenda item only, in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, we will open the public comments only at this time. Each speaker should state his or her name or their name and address. You will have 3 minutes to address the board, which will be timed by me. We will limit this section to no longer than 45 minutes. Okay. And please be respectful and mindful that your comments are being recorded. Any public comments? Seeing no public comments? We'll move on to presentations. The first presentation is Dr. Ripley.
We, the Board of Education and the administration, we have a plaque here for Mr. Morangi, who will be leaving us this evening as a member of the High Point Regional High School Board of Education. And having served for the past year in that capacity, I personally want to thank him for not only his commitment to this board, but what you brought to every meeting each month. A degree of humor, but a touch of reality, and you're a gentleman. And every single one of us is going to be disappointed when you're not here in January, because, and I believe I speak for everyone, the impact that you have made in a short amount of time will be felt for a while, and we will not forget. And you are the type of individual that our community needs on the Board of Education. Someone who is deeply involved in their community, who is deeply loved by that community, and someone who is an advocate for education, and that's you. And I will personally miss you. I believe that all the board will miss you, and we just want to thank you for that commitment. It was phenomenal.
Thank you.
Be sure to catch us on YouTube.
The next presentation is by a student council. I believe the speaker was not able to make it due to the weather conditions. The next presentation at the student council is a long-range facility plan. We have Michael Wozni here to make the presentation from EI Associates. Mr. Wozni.
Thank you, and good evening. So we are your architects and engineers of record, and you asked us to update your long-range facility plan, which really starts with the facility assessment. Our architects and engineers walk through and identify deficiencies and make recommendations. So I've got a small, short PowerPoint presentation. The assessment is divided into 4 categories. We've got the site work, building envelope, interior elevation, evaluation, and mechanical systems. And the goals for preparing this work is to identify your needs, help you prioritize your needs, and help you develop information that will assist you in updating your long-range facility plan, which is a requirement every 5 years to be done according to the Department of Education. So this first slide has got some general information about your school facility. You probably know everything that's on this page. What I really want to point out is the construction date, right here, 1965, which doesn't sound very old, especially for somebody my age, but it's 55 years. And it still doesn't sound very old for a building, but when you think about all the various building systems, roofs, windows, especially mechanical systems, each of these components have a life expectancy. And especially mechanical systems, you start seeing things last about 40, 50 years, sometimes even less. So that's one of the major focuses of this presentation is mechanical work. It's something that you don't really see, but it has a huge impact on the quality of the construction because it affects indoor air quality. Determine whether they get old or not for buildings. Systems noisy or not noisy, which impact the delivery of construction, so that's really important component. So I just wanted to highlight that age because this is, again, it seems and feels and looks like a new building. It's in general in very good shape, but there's just certain things that we've identified that we need to target and really need to start thinking seriously about planning out how you can start replacing some of these components. And I always like to start with a bird's eye view. It's a little bit hard for you to see from this distance, but you've got a real nice campus. You've got plenty of space, there's rolling hills, there's leveling of those hills, to cut and fill for the drives and the parking areas where you need big flat areas and portions of the building. So that impacts what happens to your paved areas. Wherever you're cutting, you're going into the groundwater a little bit more. So over the years, as your asphalt starts to deteriorate, you start seeing groundwater coming up in certain areas, and we can see that evidence of that. So it's a nice, beautiful campus, but it means you've got a lot of pavement, a lot of drives reaching down to the athletic fields and wrapping around the building, and there's a lot to maintain there. So it's something to consider. So starting with the site work. Again, I apologize, you've got the worst seats for looking at this tonight, but you've got copies of this. We basically have pictures showing some of the deficiencies, the asphalt paving, some of the curbing, drainage issues that need to be taken care of. And one thing I want to just note, with a lot of the building systems, there's a slow deterioration, and you can maintain, different systems with various parts, various repairs, patch roofs, patch pavement. But it gets to a point where the deterioration gets such that it gets a lot more expensive. Take asphalt paving, for example. A lot of times if it's just minor cracking, you can mill it, you mill off 2 inches off the top, and you put the top coat down, first top coat, you're good to go. If it gets to the point where you start seeing that 3/4 inch gravel coming up from underneath, that means you're down into the base of that construction, and you would require a full depth replacement in those areas, which means they got to dig it all out, they got to recompact the soil underneath, put the gravel down. It gets a lot more expensive for those areas. So, that's the kind of thing that you can monitor and, do it in stages over the years, but you just have to be careful that if it reaches that tipping point, all of a sudden it starts getting really expensive. So.
And we have reached that tipping point in certain areas?
In certain areas, and I think there's, it's limited areas at this point, so now's a good time to address it. You don't want it to be widespread, because then you get to the point again where you say, well, we're going to just completely rip out and replace it, the whole parking lot. You really don't want to get to that point. But there is evidence of some drainage issues. And, the first thing that we would recommend is to have survey work of those particular areas and geotechnical testing, just core samples, test the soil, see what the water's like, so that when we do go out to bid with documents for contractors to bid on, we know the full extent of what they're going to encounter when they start running a milling machine. We don't want to run a milling machine and find out that it was gravel or something else, or there's a catch basin that's not draining properly, or some of the items, and there is another graphic here which is even harder to see. There's some notes on here, some real good notes that just point out with the red arrows the areas where we're finding the groundwater coming to the surface, some drainage issues that are evident around catch basins. And the third item is just the drainage. Some places the asphalt's not pitched properly away from the building, or just not a positive drain. That's evidenced by just seeing ponding water, after rain. So all those items would be correct. That's why you do the survey, because you want to get detailed spot elevations of exactly what was installed. You've got a site plan from the original construction plans, but you have to get more detailed information just to make sure that any design that is made is correcting all these issues. Because if you're going to do it, you want it to last for another 55 years. Asphalt usually doesn't last that long, but certainly any drainage issues that we have to really take care of, will last for a long time. Okay, the water treatment plant needs some repair work as well, not so much repair work, but there's some parts that need to be replaced. The stabilization tank is really important because you've got peak hours, during, obviously, when the school's in session. That's when it's getting the most usage of the stabilization tank, which is even out that flow, so that this whole system will last longer. Storage tank, you've got an underground storage tank. Your insurance company is asking that you bring it above ground. We're doing a lot of this all over the state, so it's a real common thing to take care of. The pump pit, again, after 55 years, exposure to moisture, the piping, the wiring in there is rusted, so that's something that just needs to be retrofitted as well. No major structural issues there, but just the equipment needs to be replaced. And then roofing. This is another big component. What's real easy to see is you've got light areas, or white areas, and dark areas. The light areas have been re-roofed with a single ply membrane roof, so those are good to go. The dark areas are, I believe these are original. And I know they're at least 30 years old, so I think that they're probably actually full 55 years old. Now you've got solar panels up there, so you may want to phase this work, tackle the sections that don't have solar panels on them first. And we've got the square footage breakdown of all these areas, so you can kind of spread this out and phase it out over the years. And then obviously the time to replace the roof areas that have the solar panels is when the term is up with those panels, and you may consider newer panels that have better efficiency factors, or just reconfigurations. We can help you again, kind of map out, what like a game plan, a long-term plan for roof replacement. And this is just some additional pictures. Again, they're not in real bad shape. You're not experiencing a lot of leaking, so it's not like there's a rush. But now is just the time to start planning, because these are large roof areas or large expenses. And anytime that we're doing roof replacement, we think, again, we step back and think holistically. We try to put a better pitch on the roofs so that they drain better, which is always a good thing to do. We have to be mindful that that means the water is running off the roof faster, so we have to make sure that the leaders and all the drainage systems are clear so that they can handle that faster volume of water. This is there's a drain pipe in the front of the building. It's since been rerouted properly, but again, now's the time at that time to check everything, to investigate, studies to make sure that there's no blockage down the line with your drainage systems. And then the kiln in the art room is something that should be taken care of. Again, this is a grandfathered in, but the codes have changed, so these are like code issues that you need to address. And then the last category, the rooftop units, part of the mechanical systems, and you've got, it's a large building. A lot of the equipment is up on the roofs. It's in the form of heating and ventilation units. Some of them are very large, some target just smaller spaces. Sometimes they're coupled with condensing units for air conditioning. You've got exhaust fans, so it's a whole host of equipment up there, and it's all 55 years old. Now, a lot of times it doesn't look bad, except for some signs of rusting. It looks like, you just put a fresh coat of paint on it. But the reality is the equipment is not as energy efficient as what it's made now. You can't find parts for a lot of the equipment. So, again, it's time to just come up with a game plan. And we've got great mechanical engineers who can advise you as to what to tackle first with all the rooftop equipment. Just a couple more examples. In particular, some of the, the cafeteria, obviously, all the assembly spaces have different kinds of units than you might have serving some other smaller spaces. Kitchen also has specialized equipment because you've got a lot of exhaust, huge amount of exhaust, which means you've got an air system as well that's unique to that space. And I mentioned the rooftop exhaust fans. Some of them are larger for larger spaces, but a lot of them are just handling bathrooms and small spaces. And then you've got all your terminal units, mostly unit ventilators in all the classrooms. And again, at 55 years, these have definitely reduced their life expectancy. And it's real hard to find parts, and they're the type of thing that needs to be maintained constantly. And why this is really important is obvious. As I mentioned, it affects indoor air quality, especially mold. And we're finding that in situations like, I took a picture of you've got a louver here that is right at ground level, probably ponding water there. It looks like your maintenance crew, puts some pavers down there, so at least you wouldn't have a puddle of water that's moisture just getting sucked right into that unit ventilator and distributed through the classroom inside here. But again, if you're looking to phase something like this, you might tackle the ground floor unit ventilators first because they're probably pulling in the most moisture because they're close to the ground. And we can advise you with for that work as well. And then there are also cabinet heaters. Some of the ventilators are in the ceilings, but you've got a lot of cabinet heaters that serve corridors, lobbies, vestibules, and restrooms. And again, they're aging, less moving parts in these, but still they at some point they need to be replaced. And so we've got a total of the various sections, site work, building envelope, interiors, and mechanical systems, so you can see the total cost. Now, whenever we present costs, they're projected out a couple of years because we don't expect you to hit all these at once. But if you get beyond like that 3-year mark, you have to start, adding in for escalation at about 3% per year. These figures also include total project costs, and that is, we've got construction costs. The total project cost has another 25% on top of it. Soft cost, we call it. It includes 10% contingency on that construction cost for anything that, again, we're looking at things very conceptually now. Where I spoke about unforeseen conditions like the things up in the ground, the geotech testing and all that. So we have a big contingency, a healthy contingency on all these numbers, and we've got budgets in there for design fees, for testing, for any consulting fees, for getting surveys done, if there's any legal work, bonding work, so it really, we don't want you to be short with the funds, so we usually make sure we have a nice healthy contingency in there to handle all the project costs. And then I've got one more graphic that takes these same numbers and it spreads them out over what we would consider a long-term plan. We've got like priority 1 would be what you might tackle in the first 1 to 3 years, and then 3 to 5 years, and then 5 to 10 years. And again, we just put these in real general, broad categories. I think we've got all the paving in category 1, all the roofs in category 1, and then all the mechanical work, which could be delayed. That's the big figure that's out 5 to 10 years. Now, if you're looking to even things out, you can take some of that roofing work and the site work and kind of spread it out over the years. And the same thing with the mechanical. You could maybe start thinking about replacing some unit ventilators a little bit sooner. So, again, this is just, it's kind of like we just started with a priority list, and they may not be your priorities. You may say, listen, we want this to be an even flow of expenditures over the next 10 years, and how do we do that? Come back to you and say, well, we start with a little bit of roof, a little bit of site work, and just defer the other items. Just to figure this out. So I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we have access to this presentation at some point?
Sure, I could leave you with a copy. I've got it.
I sent,
It came out in the.
oh, I sent one out the other day. It
Okay.
wasn't the final, it's, I would say it's 99%.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Are we considering putting this on the website?
Yeah, yes.
I
That's
would
the,
recommend.
Yeah.
I believe that's the will of the board and communicated by the committees, and so we will put that on there.
Okay.
Should the board approve it this evening, as it is an agenda
Oh,
item?
oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. That didn't mean that was a good question.
I read it.
Approving it didn't mean that it was gonna automatically go on the website, so that's a good, it's a good question.
Sorry.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Weinstein, thank you very much.
It's-
Thank you.
It makes it very understandable, you did a good job of explaining to somebody like me, so I appreciate that.
That's my job.
I appreciate
Well,
it.
we appreciate it very much, and thank you for coming on an evening that was
Yes.
not easily accessible.
Roads are fine.
Safe home.
Not a problem, thank you.
Oh, is this how I'll put it on the website? Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
All right, the next presentation is with the HPEA. And again, considering the conditions tonight, I guess the HPEA president couldn't make it, so we'll pass up on that one. Next one is principals report in athletics. And again, considering weather conditions, they did, okay. And also curriculum instruction is canceled because of the weather conditions. And we'll move on to board objectives. Just want to remind the two objectives that the board picked out for this year is, the first one is review and update board education bylaws to ensure greater transparency and operation. Some people have already got back their comments on the bylaws, others have not. And I just would like to get a feel for how much longer people think they would need to get any comments in on the bylaws. Should we wait till the end of February? End of January? Okay. How about the end of January? Okay. And then we'll submit them in through Jim. We're gonna put them together, and then they'll be given to the policy committee, if that's all right with you, Wayne? Yes. And the policy committee will review them and make a recommendation to the board. Okay. And the next one has to do with the training. Everybody has gotten their training for the year, and the training involved everybody individually being up to date, and also the board having at least 4 training sessions a year. We just got off one. So we're on target for that objective. We'll complete that objective.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, going back to number 1, maybe we should extend it to February with the new member starting in January, and we want to make sure that he has sufficient time to review the bylaws.
That'd be fine. And if everybody else can try to get it in January, we'll get
Just
the,
give-
we'll get to
If
February.
he gets it done sooner, then great,
Right.
but if
February?
Yeah.
All right, the next one, other business. Just for everybody's edification, I want to bring it up here. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar, but there's the pending legislation that has been brought to our attention. I think it's over 170 school districts have had their school aid cut. Do you remember what our state aid cut have been? The total we're going to,
So far, or over the,
what overall, what is it supposed to be?
over a 7-year period?
Remember approximately?
It will approach $4 million.
$4 million.
It's difficult to determine that based upon, it's based upon enrollment over that time. And so while we had anticipated in the first 2 years a reduction of approximately 500,000, it's been in excess of 800, almost 900,000. So the anticipated amount will approach 4 million, if not exceed 4 million over the 7 years.
And the anticipated cut for the next school year, what did they tell us to expect?
Originally, I think it was about 380. We're hopeful that it's below 500, but we don't know.
And then what the article is in the law is, it's being proposed, is to allow schools to make up that aid shortfall outside of the 2% cap. So I believe the law was actually just passed yesterday, but it hasn't been signed into law. And we'd have to see whether we would qualify for that, but it shows the state recognizing the urgencies it's putting on all school budgets, or at least the school budgets who are having their aid cut so substantially. And we'll be monitoring the legislation as it progresses and how it affects us, and the 500,000 approximately we may miss this year. All right, action items, curriculum, Ms. Anderson?
We have received the faculty attendance rate, we have received the student attendance rate, and the suspension report will be updated next meeting. So I'd like to move items 4, 5, 6, 7, one motion, as one fell swoop. Number 4, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the harassment, intimidation, and bullying report for November 19th through December 17th, 2019. Number 5, it's recommended that the board approves the curricular and co-curricular field trips that were listed on the attachments 5A and 5B, A5A and A5B. Number 6, it is recommended the Board of Education approves the professional development activities listed on attachment A6. And number 7, it is recommended that the board approves a revision to the 2019-2020 school calendar to adjust the half-day schedule for midterm assessments from January 16th and 17th to January 21st and 22nd due to emergency school closings. I'm moving those items. I need a second.
Second.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay.
Seeing no questions or comments? Jim?
Mr. Reggie?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Corazza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Dr. Keel?
Yes. Next, personnel. John?
So in personnel, I'd like to move item 1 as a recommendation by the superintendent that the Board of Education accepts with regret the resignation of Stephen Peltier as teacher of technology with an anticipated last day of January 24th, 2020. I make a motion seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion or comments on item 1?
Yes. When Steve got here, I don't even know, John usually has all the information, but when he got here, I was his mentor. And as scary as that was, he still made it through all of that and was one of our really great technology department people. He reaches kids that are sometimes overlooked. The kids that are kind of quieter, more reticent to come out and be a big part of a bigger group. And Steve was able to reach those kids. And he enjoyed teaching, he was creative, he would come and try and steal our sewing machine so he could teach pattern development to his technology kids. And he really had a lot of creativity in the way he approached this. And he's been an amazing part of our school community. And I'm very sorry that he's leaving, but I understand circumstances bring people to other places, and he's gonna join up with another lucky crew of people, and he's gonna be teaching somewhere else, so that's good.
I think it was a very hard decision for him. He loves High Point. He has been a part of building the program that you got an email today, was once again nationally recognized, I believe. And he's a tremendous educator. He was actually a student of mine when I taught graduate school. And he gets progressive education and student-centered education. And I think very highly of him as a man and as an educator. And we will miss him very much, but we wish him nothing but the best and nothing but happiness in his future plans, and good luck. He is going to another district to teach technology education in South Jersey. Congratulations, Steve.
Any other comments? It's not. Roll call.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Corazza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Dr. Keel?
Yes.
Moving the second item in the same vein, That is a recommendation by the superintendent that the Board of Education accepts with regret the retirement notification of Jill Schroep, teacher of social studies and special education, effective June 30th, 2020. Making a motion, seeking a second.
Second.
Comments or discussion on this one?
Again, sure. Jill loves her students and her students love Jill. And I witnessed that. She used to teach in the classroom that I had to walk through to get to my office first period every day. And I witnessed it then. I also see her on Facebook. I don't know if that's appropriate to say all this on here, but Facebook, her kids from 25 years ago are always like, oh, Ms. Schroep, we love you, you're so great, I remember when we did this. I mean, she just had an impact on her students, which is a big deal in education. So I know she's also looking forward to the next part of her life, but her kids are gonna miss her.
Congratulations, Jill. It has been a fabulously successful career where you've touched the lives and the hearts of children that perhaps not everyone could have touched, but you did, because you had a heart and a soul and a spirit to love kids that were not always easily accessible, as Debbie had said. And you leave behind a legacy of a successful career where you've positively impacted a generation in a community. Congratulations and thank you.
Take a roll call.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Krause?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Sedona?
Yes.
Cliff?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Keough?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move items 3 and 4 together. 3 is recommendation the board approves the following substitutes for the 2019-2020 school year as listed. And item 4 is a recommendation to approve the following mentor for provisional teacher listed, and authorize payroll deduction payments for mentor fees for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year as listed. Making a motion, seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion on items 3 or 4? If none,
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Krause?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Sedona?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
yes.
Dr. Keough?
Yes.
Okay, item 5, we are going to, we discussed this earlier, we're going to refer this back to committee or postpone? We're gonna make a motion to postpone item 5 that's listed on the agenda indefinitely.
Not indefinitely. Definitely.
We have a date when we were.
Until the regularly scheduled January.
So we're going to postpone it until the regularly scheduled January meeting, not the reorg meeting, which I don't happen to know the date of offhand.
That's an agenda item later in the agenda.
Okay, great. So the date will be finalized when we get to that other agenda item. Make a motion, seek a second.
Second.
Any discussion on that item? Okay, so the vote is then clarified to postpone.
Definitely.
To postpone definitely to regular scheduled meeting.
Great. I think we had Robert's rules of order.
Good thing, I would have known. That's how you
Shall we
do it.
take a voice vote on approving the motion?
Like a standing vote.
We'll let it have a standing vote. All in favor, stand.
Jerk I am.
All opposed? Seeing no opposed?
Much appreciated. Okay, then I will wrap up personnel with items 6 and 7 moved together. Item 6 is a recommendation that the board approves the appointment of Kia Pascas as a long-term substitute teacher of Spanish as listed. And item 7 is a recommendation to approve Brandon Soden as a student teacher through Centenary University to complete his clinical field experience as listed. Seeking a second?
Second.
Any discussion on items 6 or 7?
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Corazza?
Yes.
Dr. Keo?
Yes. Extracurricular, there are none at this time. Policies. Mr. Dunn?
I feel like ping pong. I will move the sole item in policy. Item 1 is a recommendation that the board approves the second reading of the following new policy, policy 5756, transgender students, which is an attachment D1. I make the motion seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion on this, the only item in policy?
I would like to make a motion to amend the policy by either eliminating pages 8 and 9 or sending pages 8 and 9 back to committee for further discussion. My concern is specifically related to the activities section of the policy.
Before you discuss it, we need a second, and I will second that motion.
My concern is with the activities section, which specifically deals with interscholastic schools. I believe that the current policy, as it's written here, creates or has the potential to create a competitive disadvantage for our female student athletes. I believe that it makes us very susceptible, potentially, to litigation for violations of Title IX policy. There is pending litigation in the state of Connecticut right now. The state of Connecticut, as well as a local high school, are being sued by several female track and field athletes for violation of their Title IX rights and other statutory and constitutional rights related to this issue. I personally believe that the more appropriate approach to this would be creating a policy that is similar to the one that has been adopted by the NCAA. Because not only New Jersey courts have recognized the biological differences between men and women and how that relates to athletics, but the NCAA has a specific policy to address this, which I think is more appropriate and is something that could be discussed further in committee. I won't bore everybody with the details tonight of that policy. The NCAA, it was applauded. The NCAA's policy was applauded by the Obama administration in their, back when he was president, obviously in his administration. But it's something I think is much more fair to our student athlete, our female student athletes. I believe it's something that's much more fair to the competitive and the integrity of the competition at hand. Now, to be abundantly clear here, I wholeheartedly believe in pages 1 through 7 of this policy with all of my heart. This is strictly, my request to send this back strictly relates to the interscholastic athletics. Pages 1 through 7 of this policy are perfect, should be adopted. I will vote to adopt pages 1 through 7. However, I cannot at this time with the activities section do so, which is why I'm asking for it to be reconsidered to address some of these concerns.
And I seconded the motion because I have significant concerns, but I first want to say that I think we have a strong HIB policy, and unfortunately, Mr. Talbot is not here, but I believe what this, people are covered by the HIB policy, and this is redundant and unnecessary. I think it puts extreme burdens on the administration, unnecessary burdens on the administration, and it's, if you read the law recommends some actions to be taken by schools. That's all it does, is recommend. And then I believe this is overkill. The recommendations that the statute says should be taken. And because of that, I seconded the motion, and I would like Mr. Crosser to clarify exactly what his motion is. We can't have one or the other. Well, what is the motion that you're making? Send the whole policy back to the committee for reconsideration, or
No, I
dividing the two into two parts?
Correct. I would ask pages 8 and 9 of the activities section be returned to the committee for review. That is what I'm asking for.
So, yeah, correct me, the entire policy has to be returned to the committee for review, even if it's one sentence of the policy, from what I understand. It's something I would have asked a board attorney, but I'm speaking with two attorneys that we expect.
And I would agree, you're right. I think if we're reconsidering a section of the policy, the whole policy needs to be returned. The motion would have to be to return the policy to committee for consideration.
That would be, then I would amend my motion to ask that the entire policy be returned, if that is the case.
I have a
To
question.
re-
This is the policy that is mandated, correct?
That is, well, there are certain things that are recommended, there's some things that are mandated. This is a policy that's written by a company
Right.
based on their interpretation of what should be done. And there have numerous things in there that are not mandated. And that's why I believe it's overkill compared to what the statute says.
What is mandated is that the board does approve a transgender student policy numbered 5756. The specifics that are included within that policy are up to the board. However, it is mandated that a policy exists where there is none currently.
Thank you for that clarification.
I have a question. Does the policy that we have in front of us, that we got from Strauss Esme, who writes policy for the state of New Jersey, it follows the state of New Jersey statute?
It does.
And the NCAA, I have no idea what that looks like, but that's more of a national statement, and I think it's important that we are following New Jersey statute as Strauss Esme does their research on New Jersey school law and writes their policies accordingly. So I feel very strongly that Strauss Esme is the company we purchased this from. We could have purchased it from New Jersey school boards, but they are specifically about New Jersey law and what happens in New Jersey schools, and I think that's an important specification to make.
I think also too, is it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we approved this policy tonight, could we go back and approve an amended policy at a later date, so therefore
So
we
we
would have
could
a
make a
policy?
motion to reconsider,
Rescind.
to rescind this, and then propose a new motion.
Okay.
Or
Or we could just reconsider in committee and present at another.
well, as we do with every policy, not every policy, as we do with so many policies, we change them.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
That's absolutely, that could happen. You have to rescind the policy, I mean, you could, but we can just go back to policy, whatever number this is, and then we get the policy with the strikeouts and additions, and we can approve that on a second reading as well.
Well, it wouldn't require a second reading unless.
A first,
Right,
one
it
time,
would
we go
just
one
be
time,
Because it
instead
would
of
be a
two.
revision rather than a first time.
Right, that's what I'm.
Yeah.
So, just addressing Ms. Anderson's concern, the differences between.
You're not supposed to say my name.
No,
The
lady in red sitting in the middle.
The gentlewoman.
The distinguished gentlewoman in red.
From Branchville.
From Branchville. The state law basically requires that there has to be a policy in place related to transgender students in interscholastic athletics. My reference to the NCAA was their specific policy and how they treat transgender students within NCAA. I think that would satisfy state law in that it basically changes our policy. The way it's currently written is an all-inclusive policy. The NCAA has what's called a partial inclusive policy, and basically addresses the disparities that I was speaking of. That's what I'm talking. And I think both of them would be well within our required statutory obligations, and that's what I wanted to discuss further.
And that's pretty much what I'm saying too, with all due respect to the firm that we get the policy from. They're certainly not perfect, and I was stunned reading the policy, so I pulled the statute out, and I couldn't believe that they were writing all this in when it wasn't required by statute. So they're making, this firm is making our policy for us. It's not, they're not just putting the statute in there. The statute says you have to have a policy, and they gave some recommendations. You don't have to follow the recommendation. These people are making very onerous requirements on us, on our athletics, and on our administration. It is not required under law. And I just think we should carefully review that and make sure it's what we want and what our alternatives are, rather than just taking this as assuming that the whole, exactly as they wrote it is required by law. That's my concern.
Yeah, policies are our policies as a board, right? We are the ones that vote on them and have to live with them.
Our students have to live.
Correct. So if we are taking something from somebody that's providing us a service, a lot of times we are taking them as if they are, as it's related to us, they're mandated. I'm actually surprised that yourself as an attorney and now telling me that you've looked at the statute and then yet what is recommended to us differs from that statute. And I'm not so sure we would have gotten by the first reading if we had been armed with that information at that time.
And I apologize that I didn't look at it sooner, but in reading it again, I was just dumbfounded as the amount of things that they were putting in there. So I pulled the statute up to which I normally wouldn't do. I do take the firm at their face value usually. And I want to make it clear, I agree with the general premise of the statute. I think it's overkill. I think our HIP policy should cover it. Hopefully it does cover it. Hopefully this will make no difference in how the LGBTQ community is handled in this school, because hopefully our HIP policy is taken it. But I think we should look carefully at what this firm says we need to do when the statute doesn't say we have to do it.
But again, we currently don't have a policy, right?
State
And
statute.
we are, really, we need a policy in place. So we're kind of.
So we are deficient
Right.
by state statute currently by not having a
And not having
policy
a policy at all.
of any sort in place.
I would rather have some than nothing, and change it as, need be.
But policies,
To my knowledge, and Mr. Kehoe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm unaware of any repercussion for that fact. I think if we were to take our time and go through this and pass it once, an appropriate one that fits our community and the statutory requirement, I think we're fine. I don't think there's any repercussion to us at this point.
I will look at the implementation date. I don't think we're in violation of it. And as president of the board, I am willing to serve any time required for failure to implement on a timely basis.
I think that students go unprotected, though, that would be my
Well,
concern.
my point is, they're not.
The HIP
The HIP,
policy.
I believe the HIP is, when I look what they're trying to accomplish, and I would be, I'd be very sad to find out that our HIP and our administration aren't already protected
Right.
with the HIP policy. So that's why I'm thinking a lot of it is redundant. Not that I don't want to protect people, I want to protect them. They deserve protection as students, and at a delicate time, and they're in the mix of a bunch of people, they should have protection. But hopefully our HIP policy doesn't.
Could we make a motion to amend this policy, removing?
we have a motion already on the.
We have a motion on the table, we can.
What
after
is,
we- after
what
we
is
decide
the
this
motion
one.
on the table right
Yeah.
The
now?
motion on the table, he said, was to send it back to committee for consideration.
And then if that goes yes, then we have to take the original motion and vote it down.
No, we're taking it off. We're taking off the agenda.
Yeah,
I think we have to,
No,
I believe
I
we would,
think,
yeah, we would remove it from the,
it's a motion.
if my motion is
what is your motion, to remove it from the
return-
agenda?
to return the policy to committee for further consideration.
Refer to committee. We just, all we're doing is taking out of the agenda and referring it to
Who
committee.
gave us this cool thing? What is it?
I move to amend the motion.
Move it to committee.
What does it say? Move to committee?
Refer to committee. not
taking so
turning it
long.
down, we're asking the committee to reconsider and to look at it a little more carefully.
Okay, so the motion was to return it to committee,
Return.
and there was a second?
And I second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to return it to committee? Or otherwise?
I feel as though we needed to have a time when we're gonna address this, just to return to committee.
Whenever the committee sets it back up, who's on the policy committee?
The policy committee.
It'll come back up fast. I
I'm
hope.
the chairman,
I
and
hope
we'll
it
handle
will
it
come
as
back
soon as
up.
we can, but I don't believe we've put a time frame on anything else that gets returned to committee when to use it. So
Yeah, I'm still more comfortable with, still discussing it in committee, but, not returning it, not returning it to committee right
So are you saying you're comfortable with accepting it and then?
Yes.
And discussing a further?
now. Yes. And for a revision.
So right now, the motion is to refer it to committee. And it's
Yes.
been seconded. Is there any more discussion on referring it to committee? Seeing no more discussion on referring to committee, we will now vote on the motion to refer this policy back to committee for consideration. We take a vote on that.
Mr. Dona,
No.
Mr. Ancliffe,
Yes.
Mr. Morangi,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Dunn,
No.
Ms. Smith,
No.
Dr. Karazan,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe.
Yes.
5 yes, 4 no.
Okay.
Okay, committee will take that up at the next opportunity.
Thank you.
And that concludes my policy items.
Come on, we were getting out of here quick. Thanks, Joe.
That's even without shaving. Negotiations, there's no items on the negotiations. Buildings and grounds.
I move number 1 and 2. Number 1 is approve the submission of the long-range facility plan to the New Jersey Department of Education. Number 2 is to permission to explosive speed performance on the dates listed at $15 per participant.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Morangi,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Dr. Karazan,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Mr. Dona,
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe,
Yes.
Dr. Kehoe.
Yes. Finance. Mr. Dunn.
Okay,
The gentleman
so,
wanted?
under finance, let's make this as painless as possible. I think we'll items 1 through 6 together, right? Is that, there was nothing in the addendum? Okay, items 1 through 6.
It's on the back.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not finance, right? Right.
Correct.
Okay, so item 1 is recommendation, accept the report of the board secretary, business administrator for the month of November 2019. 2 is the recommendation, accept the report of the treasurer for the month of November 2019. Item 3 is a recommendation to approve the report of the transfers and minimum expense transfer report for the month of November 2019. Item 4 is a recommendation to approve for payment the attached schedule for the bills dated December 17, 2019. Item 5 is a recommendation to accept the adult education agency account, athletic account, cafeteria account, principal petty cash, and school store account for the month of November 2019. And item 6 is a recommendation to approve the following tuition contracts between High Point Regional High School, Sending District, and East Mountain School as the receiving district as listed. Making a motion on items 1 through 6, seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion on those items? Wonderful, none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Dr. Karazan,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Ms. Sedona?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Dr. Keel?
Yes. Transportation. Ms. Anderson?
Okay, I'm just moving item 1 to approve the following revised joint transportation agreement for special education routes and transportation for the 2019-20 school year as listed. Need a second?
Second.
Anybody have a question about that? Okay.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Dr. Kraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Sedona?
Yes.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Keel?
Yes. Long-term planning, there is no item on the agenda. Legal, there is no item. Correspondence, no item. Miscellaneous, yes.
Just want to remind everybody that the holiday party that we are hosting is being given in the library, AKA Media Center, this Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m. And thanks for your help in putting this together.
Thank you.
Any other miscellaneous items? Public comments, now is the time for anybody in the public to speak up. Seeing nobody coming forward. Non-committee board member reports or comments.
Maybe worth mentioning that the Sussex County School Board Association rescheduled meeting is this Thursday. For anybody interested in attending, I believe we may know one of the speakers.
And if you're registered the last time, you don't have to re-register.
Register, that's correct.
Found that out.
Other business. I would like to make a two-part motion based on the long-term facility plan that was presented to us today. My first part of the motion would be to refer the short-term items from years 1 to 3 to the Buildings and Grounds Committee to review and come up with a plan on what needs to be done and when. Rather than, as he said, it's just a very general overview at this point in time. So probably something that, since it's in the immediate future, that it should be done. The second part of the motion is to refer to the long-term facility plan to the Finance Committee to review the financing of the plan, ultimate financing. I'm not sure if he mentioned it, but I believe is state subsidies up to 40% of the facility plans that are financed. And I think it would be good to start looking how we could start financing a 55-year-old building that's going to have upcoming substantial repairs. Do I have any seconds to that motion?
Second.
Any comments?
I would like to just make, I think one of the important pieces is that the whole mold issue. You know, where I work, we were closed for 2 weeks for mold at the beginning of the school year last year. It's an issue everywhere. I think Hopatcong spent somewhere 6 figures or more in repairing, and dealing with the mold issue. So I think the Univents are a serious concern, and that really needs to be addressed. And I think that should be one of the first things that we need to look at. Since being that I'm not on those committees, I just wanted to share that information.
I mean, I agree. Some of my notes for this on the indoor air quality and mold concerns that we all know. What was it? Was it a high school recently that owed $1 million in mold work?
Last August of 2018, the entire state, particularly the northern portion of the state, many schools had difficulties with mold and mold remediation. High Point was proactive in the process, so we did not have to close like many schools did, but it was an issue based upon how wet the summer of 2018 was and how warm and humid it was.
And I think there's something to say about also, obviously, you're looking at the health and well-being of our students and our staff. And you think about financially what we pay in subs for teachers that get sick in our house. So I think all those things need to be taken into consideration.
More important than the pay is losing the teachers who are sick. You don't want the students to get sick.
Mount Olive Middle School, just following up on that, Mount Olive Middle School last year in 2008 was closed, I believe, most of the month, not all of the month of September, I believe, due to a mold issue. They had to transfer their entire middle school community.
And 2 more quotes that he said, he said now's the time to be planning, based on the age and the upending needs. So I think we'd be proactive and doing the school, the students, the administration, and the community a service by being proactive. And especially, I think when he was talking about the surface area outside, they were saying it's already reaching areas of repair. So we should need to know what needs to be done, how it's going to talk, and how we're going to finance it. Any other comments? Seeing no other comments, we'll take a roll call on the motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, who seconded it?
I did.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Dr. Krause,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Ms. Tadona,
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe,
Yes.
Mr. Franchi,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Keo.
I'd like to note that Mr. Morangi was easy to vote yes because it goes to the next year, but I vote yes.
Thought there was another one.
If you go to the next page, other business. It is recommended by the superintendent that the board approves 2020 Highmark Regional High School District Board of Education reorganization meeting to 6 p.m. Monday, January 6th in the cafeteria.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions?
Are we gonna have another motion to put the third?
So we do this now to schedule the reorg. At the reorg,
That's
we
when
approve the calendar
okay.
for, at which point the third Monday will replace the third Tuesday, as is the typical schedule,
All right,
which will be on the agenda for your consideration at the reorg meeting.
okay. Good answer.
Wait, but the third Monday, is that Martin Luther King?
Yes.
It is.
It is.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, just curious.
Okay. Other business? Any other comments? We
Is
voted.
that at the reorg?
No, no, we
meeting?
didn't.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't
All
vote
in
yet.
favor?
Oh.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Seeing nobody opposed, and it passed unanimously.
We
Do you have
did not
any
vote
questions?
for the regular board meeting in January. You barely voted for the reorg.
No,
Reorg, yeah.
I was just wondering if at the reorg meeting, do we discuss committees then as well?
No.
Okay.
Other business. For the purpose of public disclosure and in accordance with the Open Public Records Act, the Highmark Regional High School Board of Education has received and responded to the following Oprah requests. We have not received any Oprah requests in about 3 months. Correct. Okay.
Would have been, was it this
2
past
months?
month or the prior month?
But we've all,
It was.
it's since October, so they've all been responded to. Okay, one last order of business. We want to take a vote on the January 2nd match, Kittatinny versus High Point.
I second it.
Any discussion?
What sport?
You have to vote on who's going to win the High Point Kittatinny match.
I must abstain, even though I don't get to vote.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Third.
All in favor? Opposed? Seeing no opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
Still was an early meeting.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot longer.
So, I was gonna say this publicly, but really, guys, it's been great working alongside of all of you.